Hello and welcome to Leaders Up Close. This is part of the Engineering Leadership and Innovation Institute's program here at UCF. And again, we like to bring leaders in to share their story. And today, it's great to have an alumnus here of UCF come share her story with us. It's Leila Nodarse. She's from Terracon, and they are one of the U.S.'s largest environmental firms. And so she's going to share her leadership story with us today. And so please help me welcome Leila.
Thank you. Thank you. I am very happy to be here today. You can already tell that I'm a little bit challenged with my voice, but it didn't stop me from being here. I wanted to be able to have a chance to interact, get to know you all, and tell you my story. I also am hoping that you will be thinking about questions that either I inspire by my story or just things that have been on your mind that, you just not sure who to ask, but maybe she could, she might answer. So anything like that, that's really what this is all about, a chance for us to interact and get to know each other, and it's a real treat for me. I was at Valencia on Monday doing a similar thing with about 200 engineering students who are all en route here. They're going to be among your ranks very soon, and they had so many questions. A lot of them were just personal questions, things I was surprised that were kind of blocking them a little bit from feeling like they were really on the right path. So anything like that, you can ask me anything, you can share anything. Nothing's off limits today. So my story, I am an Orlando native, although I was actually born in Gainesville while my father was a student at the University of Florida. And he immigrated from Beirut, Lebanon to come to the States, to go to college, ended up at the University of Florida, and ended up meeting my mother, and 2 years later, they were married and I was born. So I'm actually a Gator by birth is what I say. So when my father graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, he came to Orlando because of the aerospace industry at the time. That kind of led him here. But he ended up actually going into the civil engineering, geotechnical profession, working with a very prominent founder of a firm here in Orlando called Dr. Arteman. You might have heard of Arteman and Associates, that firm, years ago. So my father started his career in the early 60s, working with Dr. Arteman, really grew his profession. And over, 10 or so years later, he started his own company because Dr. Arteman had passed away and things had changed in that company. So as I was a young kid, I was really in a household of a father who was an engineer and also an entrepreneur growing a business. And this was about the time of Disney. Orlando was really coming into a big heyday. And it was a boom town. The Orlando airport, what you see now, which wasn't there then, was all being developed. And my father's first project was actually the Orlando airport. So things like that really helped him launch his profession. But again, I'm a kid at home watching this stuff and helping raise my siblings, and a graduate of Boone High School here in Orlando. So after high school, I always liked working. I was very entrepreneurial. I would babysit all the kids in the neighborhood. I would do anything to make extra money. But I had 3 cousins who had a business, clothing business, a retail store in Orlando, and they were doing very well. And they said, hey, if you want to come work in the store on Saturdays, we'd love to have you. So I started doing that, working Saturdays, eventually working a couple days a week. I was ready to go to college, kind of wanted to stay in town, but also had the idea of maybe going to University of Florida. But my father said, no, why would you want to go to University of Florida? We've got this great college right here, FTU. Go here. So he did, being an engineer, he did this whole thing of pros and cons and why stay here and why go there. And anyway, long story short, as you might imagine, he talked me into staying right here and told me, start here, and after 2 years, you can go anywhere you want to go after that. I'll But he knew once I got started, I would really like it and I wouldn't want to leave, and that's exactly what happened. So I showed up on the FTU campus and started in communications. That was my major, communications, journalism. I liked the whole concept of you know, being able to communicate ideas with people, with the public, and that sort of thing. I was still working in the clothing business and was getting a little weary of retail. Anybody here work in retail ever? And the hours, and forget the holidays, right? I mean, you hate the holidays because that's when you really have to work the most, especially the Christmas holidays. So I was getting very weary of that. I was watching a lot of my colleagues in the communications major having a hard time getting a job because the market was a little soft. It was very, very competitive. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm not going to go 4 years, 5, right? 4 years and come out and then not be able to go into an established profession. I felt like I'd have to start all over at that point after graduating to really embark on even trying to find a career. So I was having all this stuff going on in my head. And right about that time, I took a, you know, you have to take one class in every college at UCF to learn and have a kind of a good perspective. I think that's still the case. And it was a great thing for me because I took the Man in the Environment class. Do they still have that class? You still have? It's an upper level, kind of an introductory class to engineering, and it was used to introduce it to everybody on campus. And what I learned, it was kind of a recruiting ground because they'd look to try to get students to consider engineering if they hadn't already in that major. And so I had a great professor, Dr. Taylor, who I believe is still here, and he knew about my father's company. He just kind of took a special connection with me, and he said, you know, your father's got this great company. Have you ever thought about engineering? It's a great profession, and it's great for women. And I was the first person that had ever even said those words to me. My father never had. I think my father really thought of me and kind of maybe in a different field, never really thought of me getting into engineering, which is kind of interesting. He loved that I did, but he was not the one. Everybody always thinks that he was not the one that really planted the seed. It was my professor here on campus, Dr. Taylor. And so I was thinking all through that class. And by the end of the class, I started talking to my father about, you know, what if could I maybe come and work at your company just to see what it's like? And he was a little bit surprised that I even had the interest. But after a while, he said, well, sure, I guess you could come and check it out, see what it's like. And in his business, there was a laboratory where you test soils. We actually, if you haven't seen it yet, I ended up sponsoring the Nodarse lab on campus in my company. But that's where I first learned a little bit about the geotechnical engineering profession, was working in the lab. And I really liked it. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed working with engineers. It kind of opened up a whole new realm. It had this whole thing of, you know, professionalism and ethics, and I loved all of that. I thought that was great, and it really just resonated with me. And so I remember going and telling my cousins, who thought I was going to, you know, stay working with them for a long time in their business that was growing, that I was going to leave and go into the engineering profession and start working, you know, part-time, but like 30 hours a week in my father's company. So big transition, made that leap, moved from one end of the campus over here to the first engineering building, and started my whole practice in studying engineering. And it was very hard, and it was very rigorous, but the fact that I was able to continue working and really kind of understand the realities of why we're studying and doing the things that you're doing now, it gave it a real meaning for me. And I always say it was the reason why I was able to complete the degree, because if I didn't see how it was kind of put to use in some ways, I think it would have been very, very hard for me to have completed it. But I did, and went to work in his company full-time as a project manager, worked in construction, on some projects at Florida Hospital, at Disney, at the airport. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit, about 10 years into my career, and I'm starting to feel like I really got this. You know, I got this. This is good. I'm progressing. I'm actually managing a department now in the company. His company's booming. He went from himself to like 8 offices in Florida, 300 people. Just great reputation. Everybody knew who we were, and you know, we were the best in the geotechnical field. And so one day, and I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be my path. I'm just gonna follow this path, and maybe I'll eventually run this company, and this will be great. One day, my father invites me and my mom to lunch on a Friday, and I thought, oh, good, we're celebrating something, but I don't know what. We're celebrating that my father decided to sell his company. So my mom's in tears because she had no idea, and it wasn't really anything that she'd ever thought about. It was very much an identity thing, and she thought that all of a sudden everything was going away, which it didn't. But and I was just like in shock. It's like, okay, I never even considered that that was a possibility. Now you hear companies every day, right? So and so bought this one, merging. In those days, like 20-some years ago, you didn't really hear about it that much. It wasn't quite as common. So it was kind of a big thing. And so it kind of rocked my world too, because I had this whole thing in mind of a path for myself. But that's how life goes, right? You guys have all had situations like that, I'm sure, where you think one thing and all of a sudden it's over here. And it turned out to be, when I look back, the best thing that could have ever happened, because okay, he sold to a national firm. We went from 300 to 3,000. I worked in that firm for about 5 or 6 years. At that point, a lot of my clients were more private developers locally, and it wasn't really a group that we were catering to in the new company. So I decided to really focus on them, start my own company, and that's what I did, and that was in 1991. And so through those developer clients, and just through you know, the market and a lot of the public sector work and different projects that we were involved with, I kind of did a similar thing. I went from me in a house working in a spare bedroom to eventually getting an office space in Winter Park, and then you know, expanding that, and then opening up an office in Tampa, and then in West Palm, and then in Jacksonville. And so before I knew it, like 15 years later, I had a similar size company, about 250, 300 people, and we had 8 offices around the state. And so I'm, you know, still growing that, and that's about the time. That was let's see, about 5 or 6 years ago, when the economy was starting to really soften. And we were then needing to really reach to larger firms, partner on some bigger projects, because the only stuff that was happening were either really little things or really big things that were federally funded, or you know, massive programs like work around Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades, work on the high-speed rail project in Orlando that was happening. Big stuff, but you needed to have a little deeper resources, and risky for a company, even of 300 people, to do projects that were, you know, 10, 15 million. That's just too much. It's like half of what our revenue were. So I started partnering with some larger firms, and through that partnership, I ended up finding a company that I felt was a very good cultural match to the company that I had built. And so I ended up doing a very similar thing, and I sold my company to Terracon Consultants. So now we are actually the largest geotechnical, environmental, and material science firm in the country. We have 300 offices around the country, and we have 150 offices and 3,000 employees. So that's kind of the full circle story of how that all went. It was all not without challenges, and I have 2 children, 2 boys. They're 14 and 16. So I was also, you know, being a mother, you know, birthing children, birthing this business, doing all this, and then growing this company with, you know, with a team through these years. So let's see. And then to give you a little bit of an idea, I thought two more things I want to just touch on, and then I really would like to hear some questions. Anything burning that you guys about what I've talked to you so far that you want to ask me right now that you're thinking of? Yes.
What kind of work does your company do?
Oh.
Geotech science.
Okay, that's actually, yeah, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what the geotech, what we do, what kind of work we do, and the kind of clients we work for. And then I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that are happening right here, right now, and why you guys are in the right place at the right time. And I'm just so excited for you in your careers that you will soon be launching. So thank you. Anything on what I've said so far, though? Okay, so let me talk to you about the geotechnical profession and what it is. It's a brand, and many of you probably have already. Anybody taken a geotech class so far? Yes. Anybody know Dr. Salam, Amr Salam? He's one of my colleagues, and he's an adjunct professor. And yes, I adore him just as much as you do. And he's wonderful. So thank you. Our profession is I like to say it's a branch or a niche of the civil engineering profession. We work with civil engineers, structural engineers, architects, designers, in really designing the foundations for whatever type of building or structure is going to be built. It can be a house, it can be a bridge, it can be a high-rise building, it's this building, any type of building. And in Florida, we have some very challenging soils. If you haven't taken the boat tour in Winter Park, it's a really cool thing to do. You go all through the chain of lakes, and they take you to some of the most expensive real estate in Central Florida called the Isle of Sicily. It was a dredged piece of land that was made to look like Sicily, and there are maybe 12 homes on this, and each one of them probably has $1 million worth of below ground structure just so that they can be supported. So, I mean, there are times when even a home has a very robust foundation system just so it can be supported. And then, of course, when you get into, imagine rides out at Universal. It's probably not a great topic today. Rides at Universal or bridges or, high-rise buildings downtown Orlando, 20, 30 stories, things like that. Those are all things that we look at. We actually drill, see what kind of soils are there. We have drill rigs. Classify the soils. That was my first job I talked to you about in the lab. And then we run a series of analyses to see what kind of foundation system. There's all different kinds you can use, and of course, depending on what you use, the price can vary quite a bit, from just a very shallow foundation to pile supports to mat, thick 5-6 foot concrete mat support. We analyze all those things. That's one branch of what we do. The other area is the environmental practice, which is very, very broad, as you know. Those of you, anybody in environmental practice studying the environmental sciences and engineering, very broad, great field. The field that we specialize in has to do with any kind of contaminants, whether it's of soil or water, or in buildings, it could be asbestos, lead, things like that. We assess, we analyze, and then we remediate any kind of an environmental contaminant. And then the third area is what's called, it's a material science area, or construction material testing, where once the project's being built, we test all the construction materials, the concrete, the steel, the asphalt, even the soil when you're densifying soil to make sure it meets the right densification. Those are all quality control measures that engineers do for owners to make sure that the owner is getting what he either is paying for concrete, or that the structural members are all meeting code, and you're not going to have some kind of a structural failure. So it's kind of a watch on the construction and the contractor representing the owner. So, I mean, those are three totally different things, right? I always say we're like three businesses in a business, but for some reason, most of the geosciences firm, we do all those three things. So you could end up working, studying in environmental engineering, in geotechnical engineering, or even material science, and we would be a company that you would look to work with. So that's about what we do. What I love about what we do is if you start thinking about that, every single project requires a geotechnical engineer. Everything. You can't build a road, you can't build a house, you can't build a treatment plant, you can't build anything without first knowing what's there in the soil, analyzing it, and making sure that you've got a good foundation. So it really means that everybody's a client. And so me being that communications people, I love people person, it allowed me to meet so many different people. I work with every profession. I work with every type of civil engineer, from wastewater to water to roadway to land developer. I work with architects. I work with structural engineers. I work with contractors. It's very, very broad. And then it just allows me to have a broad network of people in the community that I work with, which is wonderful. So a little bit about things that are happening here right now. Who knows about the Sunrail project? Yes. Are any of you, have you thought about how you might be able to actually ride Sunrail in I guess out here right now isn't going to work, but either for work or for personal commuting? Is it anything yet that you see where it's going to be able to be a part of your life once it's here?
Where is it running from?
It's going to run from Lake Mary down to Sand Lake Road, and it'll run all through the downtown corridor, and you'll have, I think there are maybe like 12 or 15 stations. So like if you live in Winter Park and you want to go to a Magic game, you just go to the station in Winter Park, take it downtown to the Magic game, come back. You don't have to go park your car in the arena and do all that kind of stuff. If you work at Florida Hospital or ORMC and you live in Lake Mary, you'll be able to ride right into work because there are stations right at those locations. So, but those are the kind of, that's like a game changer project and that's phase one that you'll all hopefully be riding the early part of, or no, middle of next year. Phase two is in design, and it'll go north of Lake Mary up into Volusia County and south of Sand Lake Road down into Osceola County. So, I forget, it's like a total, 61 miles is phase one, and then I think it adds another 60, 30, and 30 for phase two. So, but this is like a big game changer for our Central Florida. Just that fact that we have rail and people will know what that means, and I think it'll generate more rail for Central Florida. The airport is getting ready to embark on a major expansion, a new terminal, a lot more runway. And then, has anybody heard of the I-4 Ultimate project? You have? What have you heard about it?
It's going to be insane for the next 7 years. They said that they're going to tear down the whole thing, essentially, instead of doing piece by piece, and they can't just remodel it anymore because the foundation is maxed out. And they want to raise it 4 feet higher than it is right now, and that they want to make like a middle section of
Right.
it, so that way it's like a little toll, but it could be fluctuating in the price of the toll depending on the amount of traffic there is. So if you go at 5 in the morning, that's when the toll's gonna be like the cheapest, versus if you go during rush hour, it's gonna be most expensive.
You know your stuff. Good for you. It's good. And you're absolutely right, everything you said. If you guys have, write down I-4 Ultimate and look at that website. And it is the biggest, it's actually called a private-public partnership, which you're going to see a lot more happening in our country. It's where, in this case, the state, DOT, is giving the right-of-way for, and the whole project, the whole corridor, for 50 years to a private agency, entity, consortium they call it, who will fund, like you said, fund the design, the construction, which will take about 5-6 years, and then that same consortium will own, operate, and maintain it for the next 45 years. And at the end of all that, we'll turn it back to the state. And the reason why is the state doesn't have $2 billion to do this project. Anybody that rides I-4 knows that we need an expansion to I-4. And you're right about the way that it gets funded is the new lanes will be tolled. You'll have a choice of using them or not. If you do, those tolls will go toward the repayment of the construction. So it's It's good to know about for a lot of reasons. It's going to generate a lot of work opportunity. We hope it's going to generate some really good collaboration with the university. I'm working with there are 4 teams vying for this project. You can imagine it's a big vying for. Our team is looking to collaborate with UCF because there's a lot of research that can go on to and how we will be able to tap the resources here and have a good benefit. But confidential, that stays in this room, guys, okay? Until we win this project. But it'll generate, you'll see it's going to generate a lot of opportunity for you guys, for your friends, a lot of really cool things that are going to happen. And the whole public-private partnership is a model that our country is using more that will advance infrastructure, which will, would be great for you. So those are kind of the 3 things. Tell me what questions you have about anything at all.
They can't do it first. I get the first
Oh,
one.
you
See,
do?
there's
Okay,
this unwritten
okay.
rule, right?
Okay.
So first, thank you for sharing the entrepreneurial path, right? Because a lot of our speakers come in and then have the corporate path.
Okay.
So you shared that entrepreneurial view, and feeding off of that, you talked about the firm's reputation and credibility and how important that was there. And so these folks, in a certain extent, are going to be an entrepreneur when they come out. How important is it for their reputation, their credibility, for them to have that for themselves? And maybe how do they go build that? Right?
That's a beautiful question because so many times I will hear from people like you saying, you know what, I want to start my company. I want to go, do it right after I get out of college. And I'm like, okay, well, who's going to be your client? How are you going to fuel that business? And the way you fuel that is by first building that reputation for yourself in your profession, whatever path you choose. And the beautiful thing about engineering, it's so broad, but whatever path you choose, you'll have the ability to create a wonderful life for yourself because every one of those paths has such great opportunity behind it. So don't worry so much about should I be this or should I be that, or the market's here, the market's there. You'll create your path. Just do what it is that you love within the profession and you'll find it. But to your point, make a name for yourself, your reputation. The minute I told my clients that I had for 10, 15 years, I was leaving, I was starting my own company, I had no idea what that was going to mean. But the phone starts ringing. Well, that's fine. We want you. You've done this for me all these years. I trust you. That's how you build the business. I would caution you against trying to start a company, without having done that first.
So trust and relationships were important.
Absolutely.
So is there one thing they shouldn't do? So as you've seen engineers come out and other professionals, one thing that they built up a reputation, credibility for years, they did this one thing that just kind of wiped it out. Did you ever see anything that's just like, don't do this?
I would say, a couple of things maybe. I mean, two things that come to my mind is sometimes trying to be too narrow and thinking that I need to stay in this particular path and I'm not going to go be involved in something I'm really passionate about, which is, let's say it's, I don't know, some sort of something that for you personally you enjoy, like let's say Boys and Girls Club, okay? Maybe that's something that you grew up with. It's always something you want to do, but now you're on your path, your career. You really don't have time for that. No, always make time for things that really kind of feed your soul, feed your energy. And trust me, those paths always collide. It's incredible. Maybe for entrepreneurs, you always find a way to make what you love and what feeds your soul collide with your entrepreneurial path. That's one thing for sure. So do what you love in your personal life as well. And then the other thing I think is making sure that you give yourself a broad enough technical path when you're starting. So you can learn a lot. That's really the most important thing is having a broad path to learn from, because you don't know exactly where you're going to end up and what. So as you're looking at your first job, first career opportunity, I think that's really very, very, very important. Make sure that you'll learn a lot, not just kind of be pigeonholed in something, doing the same thing over and over again.
So I'll ask one more and then we'll open it up. And on a very personal side, So you were an entrepreneur, and you were a mother.
Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. But, so how did you balance that? I mean, I know where I'm at, and I don't have some of those responsibilities, and I find it hard. How did you balance? How are you balanced?
It gets harder and harder. It's funny, people told me, oh, wait till your kids are, when they were babies, I'm like, oh, this is so hard. Wait till they're teenagers, or wait till they're, I'm like, no, it'll get easier. But no, it doesn't. It gets more challenging because their worlds become so evolved and something. So the balance is never anything that I think anybody feels like they do perfectly, and I think you just have to accept it, that it is what it is, and you make the best of it. And I know I felt guilty a lot of times working, like at home and my children doing certain things. But I came to realize that they actually learned a lot from watching me or being around me or being in my office or, helping me with certain work projects. They've learned a lot. They've become entrepreneurial from it. And they're proud of it. They're really proud of it. It makes them. One of my sons said to me the other day, he's like, Mom, I'm really glad that you're not one of those moms that, that's not working because, you've got a life, and I'm really glad that you do because maybe it's because I'd be keeping up with him more, I don't know, but anyway, I thought it was really cute. They're proud, and once I realized that too, it made me feel a little bit better, but there's no perfect answer to that question.
Yeah. We all struggle to balance.
Yes.
Although
Although I will say it is a good balance that you can have in this profession. I have friends in other professions where it is much more challenging. Engineering and balancing your family for both men and women, I think it's a lot easier balance.
We'll let Robin ask the first one.
So going back to your personal passions and kind of combining that with your career, you give back quite a lot to the community. Will you share some of the things that you do to benefit the community and why you have such a personal commitment, such a strong personal commitment to that?
Okay, well, I guess it kind of was what I was telling you before. I mean, that's always what has made me feel good about doing what I do, is being able to be involved in the community. Now I'm in a position where I can actually financially contribute to certain things like UCF that are very near and dear to my heart. So, you start out as someone who contributes your time to things that you love and enjoy. And as I said, it turned out to be probably the thing that really made a big difference in my business, in my career, because I met so many people. So it's kind of a natural thing, and it's what I always loved, and also what I learned from both my mother and father, always giving back.
Oh, well,
Sorry.
Other than the fact that your father was geotechnical, what inspired you to take that path? Because as you said, civil engineering, it's a branch of civil engineering.
Right.
So you must have seen the other branches as well and studied a little bit of that. So what made you choose geotechnical? What inspired you?
I really didn't see that many other. I didn't really, and I guess I would encourage you all to do that. I didn't really. I started working in that company. I saw that. I didn't really have that much exposure to other areas. I knew about industrial engineering, and I was kind of intrigued by that, but couldn't really see or get close enough to it. So, I would certainly encourage you all to, but for me, it was kind of more of this direct path that I just kind of stayed on.
Yeah, because now we get to see like all the different branches.
Yes.
Highway, geotech, water resources, things like that. So.
Right. It turned out nicely because of the geotech being able to connect to all of them. So I feel like I'm not a proficient in all of them, but I know a little bit about all of them because we engage with all of them, being in the geotechnical profession.
Alright, well, I have two questions. The first one was kind of related to what he said. I'm going to ask it anyway. You got involved in geotech because your father was involved in geotech and you found your passion in that field. Do you think that if he would have been working on a different field, like on a mechanical firm or an electrical consulting firm, you would actually gone there too, or do you still stick with geotech?
That's a great question, and I think probably not. Because what I do know of it, I don't think it would have been as people interactive for me. And because I'm more people person, I don't think I could have fulfilled my, that side of me. But that's an interesting observation.
Okay. And then the second question, entrepreneurship it's a very tough field, especially because you're starting from zero. Most of the time you're actually being creative or developing new kind of technologies and new stuff. Would you say that right now, at the point where you are at your career, would you start a new company, a new entrepreneur, idea, start fresh, or you're just settled? Well, not settled, but you're happy the way you are.
That's another great question. I think like I was saying earlier, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, it never goes away. Never goes away. I mean, it's just like you're always thinking about, okay, how can I do this? How can I do that? Who can do this better? So it's always in you. Would I start another company doing what I did? No. I mean, I invested 20 years of growing that company. I gave it the best platform that I possibly could have, and I feel good about where it all has gone, and I'll continue to help carry it forward. How I would like to quench my entrepreneurial spirit now is really working with young entrepreneurs and maybe helping them kind of flesh out ideas, or maybe even financially, but staying in the mindset, but with others, not so much for me and for myself going forward.
So it's almost full circle again, giving back
Right.
what you know.
Yeah, which, that's the natural progression, I guess, of things too, and what feels really good to me now, and why things like this are ideal. So, thank you for your questions.
As an entrepreneur, how do you find inspiration to move forward and create new things?
How do I find inspiration?
Yes.
I think the ideas always flow. You guys probably all, so it's not a lack of having the ideas flow. But what I do find is you got to keep energy for yourself. You got to have energy to have the ideas flow and come forward. So, and that's different for different people. We talked about, making sure that you're kind of feeding your soul, finding your passion, getting exercise, doing all the things you need to do to be a healthy and an energetic person. And I think that in combination, the ideas will always be there to flow. Thank you.
The technology of your field has changed a lot since you started your business. How do you make sure your business and its employees stay ahead of the curve in that regard?
That was actually one of my reasons why I wanted to join up with a larger company, because they had very robust technology in terms of data management. And on the construction side of the business that I was talking to you about, I mean, it is a voluminous amount of data when you're out on a job and you're running all these tests on all these different components, and they all have to be assembled, they all have to be communicated to a variety of building departments, architects, contractors. So becomes this huge data management thing, and it really was weighing on the system. Terracon has a phenomenal customized system for this business in our business. And it was a beautiful thing. It was something that, if we could have created the whole thing, we would have, but why do all that? So the technology aspect's very important. On the geotech side, we're doing a lot of 3D modeling now of sites when they're very complicated, where you actually can enter in what the soils are, the stratigraphy, what kind of changes you're going to make to existing buildings, new buildings, all gets modeled so you can be changing things quickly and analyze and look at costs and factors. And that's been a great thing to bring into our company as well. So got to keep up for sure.
So back to construction management and
Yeah.
I haven't been in the field, right? But perceived to be fairly male-dominated. And so here you are running this business. Do you ever run into challenges of maybe a male-dominant field, and here you are making a huge difference?
I'd say, and I get that question all the time, I'd say 90% of the time, it actually is the opposite. It becomes an advantage. 10% of the time, and it's not usually like client barriers. It's almost never a client barrier. But sometimes internally, working with some colleagues, some colleagues just don't feel as comfortable working, especially with, I had, a very candid conversation this morning with, I'm a very strong personality. Not a strong voice today, but I'm a very strong personality. And some men have a hard time taking that from a woman working more as colleagues. That's been more of, I'd say, a challenge than in a client perspective.
Okay, so there's a bunch of men sitting here. Give them a little advice.
Give them advice.
How do they need to behave, right? So they're going to leave and...
Respect your mother and you'll do fine. Yeah.
It's that simple.
Pretty much, or if you have sisters, no problem. And it's been interesting to see some men had a hard time and weren't really attracted to working in my business because they weren't sure, I don't know if I can work for, a woman. But very few. And I have a great working relationship with my colleagues. Every once in a while, a little bit of a challenge, and it's just something that, that you work through. The great thing with you all and the way that I see it with my kids in high school and with you all in college, everything's teams, right? You're doing so much work as teams, collaborating. You are just being so well prepared for what the real world is all about that I think a lot of that gets really taken care of through the work that you're doing right here, right now.
You were talking about how you wouldn't be able to go into mechanical because it's not as personal as the field you're in now.
That's my perception. I could be wrong.
Okay. I was just hoping you could elaborate on that. But, and just which branches in your experience, you've seen to be more person-to-person oriented as opposed to individualistic or whatever. But if you're not comfortable doing
It's just my perception in working with that, say structural engineers tend to be a little more, less communicative in broad groups. I think mechanical engineers, I don't know. I know the civil, I think all the civil engineering and environmental, most of them are pretty broad because you're dealing with the public so many times. Many times you're going before, if you haven't been to your city or your county public meetings that they all have every month, it's a great thing to do and sit in and learn. You can watch them on TV sometimes, but you'll always see engineers, we have to get up and make presentations about projects that we want to carry forward, or even the city and county engineers have to get up and before all the city commissioners and tell them why we have to expand this treatment plant or why we had a failure on this roadway. So do make sure that you are getting the communication part of this. I felt like it was an advantage for me starting there because it's one area that in most of the engineering branches, I think it's really important. And what can actually separate and kind of allow you from staying at a certain point in your career and elevating much further.
So it's really not about the discipline, it's maybe the type of engineer and the amount of impact you want to have. So
that's a good way of looking at it. That makes sense.
The broader impact, the more communication, the more relationship.
Right, because I'm sure you could find it in any of these fields.
Yeah.
It's just how you, so it's like I said, you'll go with what you love, you'll find your path. And many of them will give you the opportunity to work with a wide range of people.
Could you speak to does life get easier after we get this degree?
It does. Well, the two things you must do. I know you must get your EI. You have to take the fundamentals, the engineering intern exam. You must take that. Right, you don't have to pass it, but you must take it to graduate. And you must also take the PE, professional engineering exam, 4 years out, after you've practiced for 4 years. You may not think you ever need it. You may not think you want it. But after you finish that milestone, then I think life gets easier because it's something that you'll always have. If you decide, 10, 15, 20, 30 years into your career, you want to do something like be a city engineer of the city that you've retired in or live in, you have to have that. You have to have a license to do engineering business. So do that, get those two, and yes, life will get easier.
In terms of the Sunrail project, are you concerned about the issue of safety and the public who here is maybe not as used to public transportation, worried about safety?
Well, it's a big education. Just knowing people. Still, a lot of people don't even know what it is yet. Know it's coming. So a lot of education around it. As far as safety, we've been involved in the design of the project, and there's so much that goes in from the federal level, state level, to safety measures. I feel like it's a lot safer with Sunrail than what we have with the current freight rail that's running through there right now. So I'm not concerned about it. I am trying to help educate people, though. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that it was rough for you going through,
My voice is rougher.
going through, school, and you have the experience and you probably, changed the grade or something. Can you elaborate how hard it was for you? I mean, just so we can see, what trials you went through, maybe through your studies.
Oh, the engineer. Oh, the degree. The school.
The degree, yeah.
Well, I guess hard for me because people assume that, all right, well, you're going to get into engineering because you're good in math, So I wasn't necessarily great in math, but I love engineering because to me, engineering is really about helping people. We were talking about that, Robin and I, on the way over here. So that's what really led me to it. So the actual coursework itself, I just found to be very rigorous for me and my talents. I had to really work to get through it. But I did, with the help of a lot of friends who are still friends and practitioners here in town, and have a lot of good alumni friends from the work that we did right here on campus together.
One last question. Oh, go ahead.
I just have a question about the Sunrail project. Are you guys focusing more just in Central Florida, or do you have plans to expand it throughout the whole state?
Well, it's a project that's being done by the state Department of Transportation. Sunrail is District 5 is Central Florida region. There's 7 districts of DOT in Florida, so that's a District 5 project. There are other similar projects that are happening around the state, and certainly many around the country that already exist and are happening right now, or in design and construction right now. So rail, because it's any kind of mass transit, and you guys are the ones that need to help carry this forward, because it's just so much more economically feasible, environmentally, and safer really too than driving more cars. So I think it's the way of the future, and we'll see much more rail in transportation, yes.
So I'm going to have the last question. As you shared your story, you mentioned 2 key mentors, your dad and Dr. Taylor.
Right.
Clearly had an impact on your life. And so these folks are here now and are going to be leaving. Any advice for how they might want to pursue, or how they would pick the right mentor? Or is it a right mentor? From it had an impact on you. How do they go get that same impact?
How do you, well, it's probably that, not so much that you find them, but they almost find you. So maybe it's just exposing yourself to many different venues, to many different people, and this is great that you have the opportunity to, bring in people like myself and others. So having those kind of opportunities where you're meeting a wide variety of people, and I think the mentors you'll find each other, I think. And I certainly would be happy to communicate with any of you. You can get my email, my cell. I'm happy to help you any way that I can.
Thank you for mentoring us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.